Good evening, everyone. We are at Spotlight on Romance, and with us is Brooke Black, who is a writing coach, editor, and founder of the Black Bear Communications, where she helps nonfiction authors and storytellers turn ideas into powerful, publishable books. She specializes in mindset-based coaching and emotionally resonant revision that helps authors write with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brooke. And today we're talking about understanding line and copy editing and when you're ready for them, which is really important. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead, Brooke.
Thank you for having me, Paula. I wore pink because this is a romance group and I never get to wear pink. And I wanted to lean into that a little bit. Our last conversation, Paula was wearing red, so it inspired me. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. I am a professional editor and book coach. As Paula said, I help authors move from draft to polished manuscripts with clarity and confidence. So today I'm going to walk you through the often misunderstood next phase, what happens after developmental editing. So I want everyone here to drop two things in the chat if they can. First thing is if you have any initial questions so that I can make sure that I answer them in the presentation, or at least we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. And then the second thing to drop in the chat is where you are in the writing or editing process. Daphne, if you're not a writer, that's okay. But for those of you that are writers, if you could drop where you are in that process so that I can kind of understand where everybody is, and that might help kind of inform how much time I spend on certain parts. So like I said, my name is Brooke Black. This is me. I'm the founder of Black Bear Communications. We have a program called the Hive Collective where I work with authors like you. And I always get asked about the process, the editing process. There are so many terms, and writers often go into this and then they get stuck because they don't really know what to do with their manuscripts, or they waste money because they have the wrong type of editor at the wrong time. And so that's why I'm here today. So the first question that people often ask me is, do I even need an editor? Why do I need an editor? The short answer is yes, you do need an editor. You've poured your heart into this book. You know the characters better than your best friend. But the truth is, you're too close to the story to see it clearly. That's where an editor steps in. And there's science that talks about how our brains, how we reread the manuscripts we've written and why we do need somebody else to look at our manuscripts. So editors catch what your brain skips, whether it's pacing issues, character inconsistencies, repetitive phrasing, or even just a moment that doesn't land the way that it should to resonate with that audience. As editors, we help protect your reader's experience. And especially in romance, where emotional payoff is everything, an editor ensures that your book delivers the feels without a distraction. So there's no clunky dialogue, no plot holes, no grammar mistakes that pull your reader out of the moment. Because as romance authors, we need to be in the moment, right? Your editor should feel like a teammate and someone that respects your voice and helps you level up. So don't be afraid to ask for sample edits or hop on a quick call before you invest any money or sign a contract. That relationship is so, so critical. But Brooke, that's expensive. Having an editor is so expensive. Yes, it is. But here's the caveat. Not every edit needs to cost thousands of dollars. You can mitigate some of this expense that you're going to have, this investment, by leaning into and learning how to revise your own work first. So especially common issues like filtering out passive voice. Whenever it comes to structure, voice, and polish, editors bring an objectivity and genre knowledge that most of us as writers can't just see on our own. So most of them should be better than just your friend who is really good at English, or my friend is also an ELA teacher. There's no shade to them. That's great. They can be very, very helpful, and their attention to your manuscript does help, but it shouldn't be the only editing that your manuscript gets. Many authors hire the wrong kind of editor at the wrong time. This is a gentle reminder that each editor has their own lane, and hiring them too early or late can waste your time or money. So your job is to bring them in when their expertise matters most. So the purpose of the session today is to help you understand the difference in those editing techniques and stages so that you can choose the investment for your work in progress at the right time. Romance readers are some of the most loyal and detail-oriented. So having an editor helps you sidestep those genre-specific pitfalls, ensuring that your love story feels fresh, intentional, and satisfying. So there's quite a few, like if you have a genre that specializes in thriller, they're going to be looking for different things than an editor that specializes in romance. And while many of them can go through and do a good job, you're going to get the best results if you find somebody that's specific to that genre. So for example, at Black Bear Communications, I'm the senior editor. We have many junior editors. So if I have somebody that comes in and wants to write fantasy, that's not really my go-to. So I'll still oversee it, but I'll bring in a junior editor that specializes in it. And it's usually somebody that really, really loves to read fantasy. I don't. So that's okay to admit. And I don't feel offended if somebody says, hey, there's a different editing service that's better for me. I'm like, that's okay. And that's a really important conversation to have with your editor. So here's the roadmap. First, we have developmental editing, then line editing and copy editing can kind of go hand in hand. Some people use the same term for both of them. And then proofreading. So each stage zooms in further, getting more granular as you go. So we're going to walk through the core stages of editing so we can understand how they build on one another and why the order matters. So first is developmental editing. This is the big picture phase. Your editor is looking at structure, potholes, pacing, character development, theme, arc of the story, character arcs. They're helping you move scenes around, rewrite chapters, maybe cut chapters, and sometimes completely rework the shape of a book. Then, and bear with me, some people will say copy editing is next. That's fine. We can, this is just the way that I would say that is the best way to do it. Line editing would come next, and that's where we zoom into the sentence level. So line editor focus on how the story is told, the tone, clarity, rhythm. They'll help elevate the prose, make your sentences shine, make them stand out to that genre reader. Ensure your voice is consistent, make sure your voice is compelling to the reader. Then copy editing follows. This stage is about technical accuracy. So this is grammar, punctuation, spelling, word choice, consistency. And yes, I think most of us can agree that should come after the line edits because line edits are a little bit more developmental. But I say that some people kind of interchange these because some people do them hand in hand, some editors do. But they should be doing multiple scans and multiple revisions of your work. If they're saying that they're doing it all in one single revision, then maybe talk to them about that. So a copy editor ensures that what you've written is clean, correct, it adheres to style conventions. It's less about how the story feels and more about how the story functions. And then proofreading is the final polish. It's the top coat on your nail polish. It's done after the manuscript is designed and formatted. A proofreader catches the lingering typos, formatting issues, visual inconsistencies. It's the last chance to catch errors before we hit publish. So one important caveat is that these definitions can really fluctuate depending on the editor, the publishing house, even the country that you're publishing from. Some editors might use slightly different terminology like substantive editing instead of developmental editing, or they might blend roles. Like I said, some people kind of combine them a little bit, especially in indie publishing. So when you're hiring or collaborating, it's very, very important to clarify what's included in an editor's service and ask about their process. There's not a right or wrong. You just need to know what works for you and what's going to work for the editor and possibly the publishing house if you're going the traditional route. So I'm speaking on behalf of the process that I use, but that I've found is very common in the industry, but I have found that sometimes people have some different definitions. So based on the chat, it looks like everybody's kind of here for the right reason and they're in the right place for this presentation. We're kind of looking at what's going to happen next after developmental edits. So if you finish your developmental edits or you're going through developmental edits, you've likely revised your scenes, you've deepened your character arcs, you've tightened up your structure, the story works, there's no major plot holes, but that doesn't mean it's ready to publish. Developmental editing is just the first step. So after that, your manuscript moves through all the other editorial layers that I outlined before, and each of them has a specific focus that ensures that your book is not only compelling, but also clean and professional. So how do I know when? Well, we understand that developmental editing is big picture. Once your story's structure, pacing, and character arcs are solid, you're ready to move on. That's your sign that it's time to zoom in and massage the language. So that's easier said than done, right? After all, I just said that we discussed how it's really, really hard to make these judgment calls about your own work. So lucky for you, I have curated a list of questions that you can ask yourself. I do not have it as a PDF right now. It's still in design. So if you sign up for the newsletter that I've linked in this on the screen, it will come in our July newsletter. But I'm going to read them right now. So if you don't want to subscribe to my newsletter, I'm going to read them to you. And this will be in the YouTube replay if you don't catch it all. So the first question is, have I addressed all major structural issues like plot holes, pacing problems, or scene order? Are my beginning, middle, and end clearly defined and purposeful? Have I clarified my have I clarified my book's central message or themes? Is each character necessary, distinct, and well developed? Have I implemented feedback from my developmental editor or trusted readers, or both? When I read my manuscript, do I find myself focused on line level edits more than big picture changes? Am I no longer making large cuts, rewrites, or moving entire scenes around? If you can say yes to most of those, then you're probably ready to move on to the next phase. It means that your foundation is strong and now it's time to start refining and massaging the language, tightening up the prose, preparing for the line editing, copy editing, and proofreading stages. There are some more questions that are in that PDF that I'll send out, but I didn't want to take up everybody's night asking you a million questions. So both types of editing support, we're looking at line versus copy. So what's really the difference here? I've explained what both of them are, but like I said, some people kind of interchange these terms. So they both support reader engagement. So in different ways. The line editing is very creative. It brings your writing to life, specific to the genre. Copy editing is mechanical. It ensures your work is clean and credible. So I think of it as like, line editing is cooking, so you can play with spices, you can do different techniques, you can marinate things, you could put something on the smoker, you could put it in the oven, it's going to turn out different based on who you're going to have as a house guest. And then copy editing is like baking. Like you have to put a certain amount of baking powder in this and you have to cook it at a certain temperature or it's not going to turn out right. So you need both of them for a dinner party, but you have to do them in the right order. So a good way to remember this is line editing protects your voice. Also developmental editing protects your voice, and copy editing protects the rules. So sometimes authors worry that a copy editor will fix their voice or change it, but that's really not their role. And if they're doing that, then you need to have a conversation. A good line editor or developmental editor will preserve your tone, preserve your humor, your quirks while improving the flow. A copy editor will follow rules, but with a genre lens. So in this instance, an audience, a romance lens, and they'll be careful not to sanitize the personality out that makes your story feel real and appeal to readers of that genre. So let's take a look at how line editing and copy editing shows up in a typical romance scene. So first, we have the original. She looked at him, her heart beat really fast, and she didn't know what to say. Now, this technically gets the job done. It needs some edits. But what we really need to do is copy edit it to read a little bit better and not sound like very juvenile. So if we copy edit it, we might say, she looked at him, her heart beat really fast. She didn't know what to say. We get it. It makes sense. It's technically correct as far as I can see. But it doesn't really capture the emotional tension of a romantic moment. And if you read romance, you know that romance authors are very, very good at this. So this final version elevates the emotion a little bit more. So she met his gaze, her pulse racing, words caught in her throat. We're tightening the prose, varying the sentence structure, varying sentence length, because we went from having 3 choppy sentences to 1 long one. You could maybe mix it up and make that into 2 sentences with 1 short and 1 long. It flows a little bit better. It makes the reader feel something. They might even connect a little bit more. They're like, I know what that means whenever I have the words caught in my throat. Like I just stuttered 3 times. I know what that means. So think of it this way. Copy editing makes your sentences correct, while line editing makes your sentences sing. Now, you might be wondering, if a copy editor already cleans everything up, what does a proofreader even do? Why do I even need a proofreader? And that's where I used to get really confused. I'm like, what's the difference between copy editing and proofreading? So proofreading is your final safety net. Many will say it's done after your book is formatted for print or digital, but I use this term a little bit looser because I do the phase where I also print out a physical copy whenever I'm editing for somebody, and I do a proofread. I wouldn't say it's the final proofread. I do a proofread holding the paper, using a pen, and really going through it on printed paper. And again, there's science that says the way that your brain reads on a screen is different than how it reads on a piece of paper. So it is important to do that proofread on the paper, even before you're ready for formatting, or even before you've asked a publisher or an agent to read it, or uploaded it to KDP if you're a self-publishing author. So many will say it's after you formatted. That's okay. That's the more typical answer. But I also would argue that there is a form of proofreading that editors do before this. Yes, when you're formatted, you'll need to do another proofread. Even the small tweaks in the layout or last minute edits can introduce sneaky little errors, like an extra space, a missing period. Sometimes I've noticed, like when you resolve edits, there'll be a space between the last letter of a word and the quotation mark, like the ending quotation mark, or a line break in the wrong spot. So it's good to have a proofread to go through and make sure that all of those are fixed up. A proofreader makes sure that the version that you send out into the world is polished, professional, and typo-free. So you think of them as your final set of eyes before you hit publish. So the publisher, if you have a publisher, might bring on somebody to do that final proofread, but you can also have an editor do it even before the publisher even sees it, which I think is very, very important, because you don't want to send something that still has typos. I don't think you need to wait till you're ready to format to do a proofread. Just maybe don't call it the final proofread. So again, here's our roadmap. First, developmental editing, where we shape the plot, the characters, and the story arc. Once that's done, we move on typically to line editing, where your voice is polished and your sentences start to sing. Then we have the copy editing, which is cleaning up all the grammar, consistency, and technical details. And then finally, proofreading, which is that polish before formatting. And then again, technically after formatting, we'll do another proofread, and then everything kind of finds its place. So each of these steps matters very much, and skipping one can leave your manuscript very short of its potential. So I flew through that presentation. So if there's any part that you guys want me to go back to and see what's on the screen, I can, but otherwise I'm going to put up the Q&A slides. And then actually I need to scroll through here and see what questions people had. I see. Polly, you said it's way too long. Your manuscript is way too long. That's where a developmental editor will help very much with that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Brooke.
You're fine. I didn't mean to talk over you.
Okay. So I think it was the third person that I worked with through the Romance Writers of America RAMP program. And the book that we worked on wasn't the first one that she got published. It was a different one that she actually got a traditional publishing contract on first, but then she ended up selling the book that we worked on in that series. When she sold it to a British small publishing house. And the first thing they did was they went through and they rewrote it because it was taking place. It was a historical romance taking place in London, and they rewrote it with British English spelling, etc.
Okay.
I guess because that was going to be like their first market, although it is sold in the United States also. I'm working with a gal who lives in Canada, and I'm working on her manuscript right now. And of course, she has Canadian spelling. But I believe that her market is the US. And so, I won't be doing the editing and that kind of stuff. But in your opinion, shouldn't that manuscript be rewritten in US English instead of Canadian English if the major market is the US? Let me give one clarification. It takes place in Canada. It is a contemporary romance that takes place in Canada.
That's a conundrum. First I was going to say, yeah, it needs to be edited for a US market, but if it takes place in Canada and she's a Canadian author, I kind of like the authenticity, honestly. I think that's really truthfully, that's probably a publisher should make the call, even though I want to say the author, but the publisher is the one that is going to probably know the most about the marketing of it and how it's going to sell. But in my opinion, I always err on the side of authenticity. So I think if it had, is it first person?
It's no, it's third person.
If it was first person, I was going to lean harder into the Canadian one. I don't know why. I think that would fit a little bit more. I think you can make an argument either way, but if the story takes place in Canada, I mean, definitely if there's any type of, if they're going to show like any signage or if they're going to talk about like what was written in a journal, then that needs to probably be edited more on the Canadian side. But I really think that I could see the publisher swinging either way on it.
Okay. And Sally agrees with you, and I kind of agree with you also. But that was one thing that, what kind of sticking in my head a little bit is that should it say Canadian English or not? So
it's so tricky because yes, we want to be very, very authentic to the author. And I think that there's value in especially Americans reading
Canadian or British
leaning into the
English.
culture, I guess
Yeah.
what I should
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I've
Marketing
talked to some authors, and maybe this is why it's in my head. And if I hadn't had these things, I probably wouldn't think anything of it, because I have read books written in British English. It doesn't bother me. But I have heard from some authors, some British authors, who complain that American readers leave them bad reviews because of all the misspellings.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer. I think there's value in both. I think that if they're, part of me is like, yeah, you don't want any bad reviews, right? But also, those aren't even the readers that I care about. Those are going to be the people that follow me in my career as an author. They're going to be the people that respect like who I am and where I come from. And if the story's based in Canada, I think that you could leave it the kind of Canadian styles.
I will mention that to her. In fact, she will probably be watching this video once I get it up onto YouTube. I was surprised that she wasn't here today. So,
okay.
So, is there anything in an editor/contract that we should pay close attention to? That is asked by Melissa.
There's probably quite a few things that I'm going to forget to say, but I think the most important one is how many revisions that they're willing to do. The second one, just because we were just talking about it, like if you are an American author, you might want to have an American editor or somebody that's comfortable editing American literature. If you're, and again, you're gonna have to have the conversation Paula and I just had, like, who's the market? How do I want this to be represented? So maybe somebody that, and that kind of, it goes beyond just, where you live or your ethnicity. It's more like somebody that's going to align with who I am and what I want to represent. Like, I'm probably not going to have a man ever edit my book. I'm not, nothing against men, but if I'm writing a book from a female perspective and I'm a female writer, I want somebody that shares that identity with me a little bit. I'm not saying that I need to not ever venture into different cultures or anything like that, but I also need to be aware who can really capture my voice as well and understand my voice. But that's not, I guess that's not really a contract thing. Whenever it comes to contracts, I would say how many revisions. I would say if there is any type of clause with like the timeline, or if there's not, maybe asking for there to be some type of timeline. I know that it's very, very common knowledge that editors can be very slow. I I've had multiple people be like, "Well, that's the nature of your work. You guys always miss deadlines." And I'm like, "Well, not really." But some editors do, and that's okay. I have missed deadlines before, but making sure that there's something, if the timeline is very, very important to you, or you have a hard deadline with a publisher or with your launch plan for your marketing, then making sure that you have some type of deadline in place that you guys both agree on and is realistic. Um, I would say obviously the investment, the cost, and then making sure that that cost is covering exactly what you expect. So really look at that scope of work. Are they a line editor? Are they doing everything? Are they just a proofreader? Is it going to be just them? Do they have a team of junior editors like I do? Like, and making sure that everybody's really on the same page at those things. So I really do think it's important to review your contract thoroughly and to have a contract. Make sure your payment terms are on there. When are you going to pay? Are you going to pay it all up front? Are you paying it after the product is delivered? Are you paying it in increments? Can you afford those payments? Um, and then, yeah, identifying your timeline, clarifying the scope, and
What about recourse if what you get back is poor work?
well, that I don't think that has to do with the contract as much, in my opinion. And I'm not a lawyer, I don't give legal advice. But I will say that I think that you can mitigate that risk a little bit if you do some type of sample edit and you have a good conversation. I think everybody should have at least 1 hour long, at least, meeting where you are really connecting with that editor and making sure this is a good fit. You guys kind of vibe with one another, for lack of a better term, and then making sure that you get those sample edits. And sometimes you have to pay for a sample edit, and I don't think you're ever going to waste money on seeing feedback from 99% of the people that call themselves editors. So invest in that sample edit and make sure before you waste your money on a bigger investment.
One thing that you brought up was who you were going to work with, male, female, etc. And it reminds me of the one and only time I paid for a beta reader. And I did not do what afterwards seemed like some basic research. I found the person on Fiverr. He had a lot of good reviews. I had him read my manuscript, and the feedback I got back, I realized, oh my gosh, this guy does not read romance. He reads action adventure. I could tell that by
Oh,
his
wow. Why did
comments.
you even want to be a beta reader for you?
So, yeah, so it's important to know what a person, whether you're talking about a beta reader or an editor or whatever, what they specialize in.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's very, very important. If an editor can't tell you what genre they specialize in, then they're too worried about getting the deal and they're not being authentic and truthful with you. Every editor, just like every reader on the planet, you can ask, and they're not going to say, I like every genre. but they're truthfully going to know what they like to read. Editors are the same way. Writers are the same way. They might say, yeah, I could, like, I'm a senior editor at my company. I could edit anything. Will I do a good job editing a genre that I do not read and I do not care about? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it would be a disservice to an author if I told them that I could do it. So I'll tell them I can. I could definitely do a proofread for any type of, book written in CMOS, but you do not want me to be doing a developmental, a line, or a copy edit. Well, I mean, maybe a copy edit would be okay, but a line or a developmental edit on a genre that I do not specialize in. And if they're not willing to tell you that, then they are not being authentic with you and they are just really, really looking to secure the contract, and they're being a little too salesy, in my opinion. There,
That's valuable words. Thank you, Brooke.
yeah. There's one more question in the chat. What are some steps you'd want an author to do before seeking out your services? One, listen to this recording because then you at least know what you're looking for, hopefully. Um, one thing I don't want people to think that they ever need to do is I had somebody say, well, I put the whole book in, I think they used Grammarly. I put the whole book in Grammarly and had that edited first before I sent it to you. I was like, oh, please don't do that. That's gonna change your voice. It's gonna change your words without you even approving them. And it's gonna and we can all say what we want about ChatGPT. I'm not gonna lean either way on a public platform on ChatGPT, but I will say that you are putting your work into a computer, a robot that is now has all of your work. So please don't put it through Grammarly first. I'm not saying I'm anti-ChatGPT or anti-Grammarly. I love Grammarly. Don't think it's going to help your editor if you do that first. Some other things I would think that they should do before seeking out services is knowing their budget and their timeline. A lot of people have a call with me and then they hear the prices and they go, "Ooh, I need to go check on my budget." That's fine. I do the same thing whenever I'm having a call with somebody trying to sell me a service also. But if you truly don't know your budget, you don't know if you're ready for this investment. I think it's very important to really think about that before you hear what something's going to cost. So then you can be happy if it's lower, or if it's going to be a higher cost, you can kind of figure out what your timeline is to be able to pay for that service. If you have no idea what the budget is going to be, or you don't have a budget, or you don't think that this is a good time for you to be spending any money, then it's not really worth having a call yet, unless it's some type of call where you're asking questions and needing to gather more information. But if it's just like a consulting call where you're kind of not a consulting, like sorry, what am I thinking of? Like a sales call, like you're trying to see if this is a service rate for you. Don't go in without having a budget made. And it doesn't have to be firm, but just kind of knowing a ballpark what you could afford and what you're willing to invest into this is very, very helpful, because then also if somebody comes to me and I'm either too high for their budget or they have a lot more to spend for some reason, then I can say, actually, I have a few referrals for you. Like, hey, I'm not a fantasy editor, and your budget's a little bit lower than what's going to work here, especially because fantasy novels are so long. So I'm going to give you a list of fantasy authors or fantasy editors that I know of, and I can kind of tell you who's going to be closer to your price range. And I think that's really, really helpful. So then you're at least getting something out of that conversation with me, and you're not just like leaving the meeting like, oh, now I need to go get a side hustle to afford an editor, and then you give up on your manuscript because it feels out of reach.
Let me ask a question. How do you feel about partial edits as opposed to a full manuscript edit?
I guess it would depend on the purpose. So maybe they're like, I've already had my book edited and then I added this whole section that I think that I want to add in, and they need that. Like, sure, if there's a reason that you're not going back to that first editor, sure. If they're doing a partial edit because of budget, sure, we can talk about a timeline to finish the rest. But if it's a partial edit because they used a different editor and they just want to clean up one part, then part of me is kind of like, it would be like having two writers and never introducing them. Like you kind of need the editor to be able to look at the whole picture as well. I understand maybe not wanting to pay for something you've already had edited, but I do think that some type of like hybrid situation could, I think most editors would work something like that out. Like, hey, I'm going to do a developmental edit to the whole piece. And then after that, you probably only need to proofread for that part that's already gone through all of these steps. Um, but yeah, that's hard to answer without knowing exactly like what the purpose for only having a partial edit would be.
Well, I think to myself sometimes cost would be an issue.
Huh.
I myself work with an editor, and I have for all of my books, where I give her the outline of what I
Yeah.
expect it to be, and then I send her chapter by chapter, which
Oh,
is
absolutely. Yeah.
amazing, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. So the editors I work with in the that are in the Hive Collective, we do a collaborative editing process. So we are essentially doing partial edits all the way through as they're writing. I'm working with them alongside of them, editing along the way. But in the end, whenever it comes to like doing the final proofread, I'm going to do the whole thing at once. Yes, I can be very much cleaning it up along the way. But along those lines, like what you said, if you don't want to be, if you say I don't have this whole thing done, I don't think that you can truly do a true developmental edit without reading the whole manuscript. But two, I think that there's value in saying, like, I'm going to only, like, maybe for these 3 months, I'm only going to be working on these three chapters, and these three chapters are the ones I'm going to get to you. And then in 6 months, I'm going to be ready to make my second payment and do another chunk. But you really just have to talk to the editor about having a plan that works for both of you. Um, but like I said, in the end, I do think that you need to have the whole manuscript in front of you to do a true developmental edit.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Because one thing you don't want to do is say this first half has been edited, developmental edited, and then you get to the second half and it's like, well, this is a total disconnect.
And you're like,
Or
what happened in the arc? Or there's a big, the plot hole doesn't show up in the whole manuscript. The plot hole's only in the hole. So, you can't find the hole if you don't look at the whole thing. So,
right.
um,
Okay.
yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question, or put it in the chat. We can do it either way. And if we don't have any questions or comments, then we might just close this down a little bit early. I thank you very much, Brooke. This has been very informative. I appreciated seeing your take on the copy edit versus the line edit, because I've always thought of a copy edit coming first, but the way you explained it, it makes total sense to have the line edit first. Otherwise, you're going to end up doing two copy edits.
Correct. And like I said, editors use different terminology. So I'm very clear. Like, this is the way that I understand it. This is the way I explain it. If somebody tells you something different, don't argue with that. If another editor says, this is what, this is how I do line editing, everybody has their own way in which they work the best. That's why we have different editors. That's why you have different writers. It's if you're
Okay.
working with a historical that uses Old English, how to work with that editor. Make sure that your editor is comfortable editing Old English. I went to school for English communications. I have a minor in creative writing. I took classes reading these books. Can I edit it well right now? Just 15 years out after my degree? Probably not, but if I were passionate about editing historical, then I would likely be well versed in that, or at least depending on what, I mean, with historical, you could have all kinds of subgenres, but making sure that you need to make sure your editor is well versed in that. And they are out there. They have plenty of editors that love doing that and will edit Old English. So just making sure that they have experience and the passion for it.
And I'm so glad you brought that up. Another thing that was brought to my mind was historical editors.
Mm.
That if you are using a historical editor, make sure that he or she is knowledgeable about your time and place, because a history major who knows everything about French history probably wouldn't be a good one for American Revolution, you know, or the Scottish Clan Wars, you know. So Sally doesn't have a QR scanner on her phone. Can you maybe drop a link into the chat?
I sure can.
Yeah.
That should get you everywhere you need to go.
Yeah. Thank you. Because it took me 2 years to figure out that my camera took a picture and didn't do a scan. So it's like, oh, well, you know, you walk into a restaurant these days and they give you this QR code to scan to get the menu. And it's like, well, I guess I'm not eating today. I finally figured out that I had to download it.
Do you have?
I finally figured that one out.
I'm like that too, because also you're like, I want to put my phone away and enjoy my company. And now you're forcing me to get it back out.
Yeah. So
thank
you very much, Brooke. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or any comments before we wrap things up? Okay. Thank you. You have done wonderful, Brooke. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you all for coming. If I talked too fast, watch the recording. There's a way to slow it down.
I would hope to have it up by the weekend. I will even try to get it up tomorrow. I don't have anything huge planned tomorrow. So maybe it will actually get up tomorrow. Okay. And I will send out an email to let everybody know where to find it.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Bye-bye.